to the Growth Over Grades podcast, where we talk about education ideas and topics that matter most to our Spaces EDU educator community. I'm your host, Melody McAllister, educator advocate for Spaces EDU, your solution for digital documentation and assessment of student learning for all. In this episode, I will talk with guest Stefanie Crawford. Stefanie has served as a classroom teacher, coach, and has recently become the executive director for IDEA, the Illinois ISTE affiliate, which also hosts an annual educator conference right outside of Chicago called IDEAcon. As part of her role, Stefanie stays on top of EdTech and what teachers and districts are looking for to help them meet their students' needs. Stefanie advocates for students and teachers and is able to look at EdTech with this special lens. As a leader in her public school system, she wasn't afraid to pursue change that meant better classroom learning, even knowing she had to change her own practices. She's a strong voice and advocate in her local community and globally. She carries that courage and leadership in her newest role, too. After becoming friends virtually a few years ago, I am so thankful to have met Stefanie in person at IDEAcon and ISTE this past year. Today, we're going to explore some things she's been learning in her executive director role, a little bit about IDEAcon, and an EdTech that teachers really need these days. So, Stefanie, it's such an honor to have you on the Growth Over Grades podcast. Before we get started, can you tell our listeners about your education journey?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Melody, for that introduction. I feel like it was just like so heartwarming hearing all those very lovely things. Thank you.
All true, all true.
So I actually started teaching as my second career. I actually got an English degree because I wanted to go into publishing. And that was my road. I mean, I went to Boston, I was in the publishing houses, and I actually dating myself. I graduated 6 months after 9/11 happened and the publishing market just dried up. They stopped hiring indefinitely and I had to pivot. It reminds me of that Friends episode, right? Pivot. That's what I had to do. And I got a position as a reading aide and realized it was terrible pay, by the way. but I realized like, oh, I'm actually really fulfilled by working with these students. And at that point, I was making lessons. I was getting to work with small groups. It was a really lovely job. I mean, in a lot of ways. And it pushed me to go forward into getting my master's in education. And so during that time, though, I actually worked as a buyer for a company in my area and had to make the choice. Do I continue with that or do I go to my student teaching? So clearly, student teaching won out. I, from that moment on, totally invested in education. And I actually student taught in second grade, but found my job and my real place of belonging in middle school. So I taught middle school English for 13 years. So sometimes the English portion, sometimes the lit portion, they were split often. And 6th, 7th, and 8th grades really love 8th grade. They're like my heart. And that is actually when I started pursuing grading reform, was when I'd been in the classroom for a while and all of that. But during my experience in the classroom, I kind of had that other aha moment. Like, I have teachers that are asking me for help. They're coming to me and asking me to brainstorm ideas or help them figure out how to collaborate with maybe the building librarian, those type of things. And all of a sudden it was just like, oh, I think what I need to do is help other educators now. I need to help them have a place, have a person that's dedicated to them, that they feel safe asking for help, that they feel safe experimenting. And that is how my journey in instructional coaching began. From there, I went into work in Illinois. We have regional offices of education. I ended up being a director of professional development for an ROE that had 3 counties worth of schools. And now here I am with IDEA. So it's been a very interesting journey, but along the way, nothing has changed about my desire to help students and help teachers. And in fact, that's what I still do. Even as an executive director, I still go into schools and work with teachers. So that's really, it's been kind of a long, strange journey, but that's where I'm at and I wouldn't change it.
I wonder how many teachers could say it's been a long, strange journey. A lot.
I was going to, probably all of us, right?
Right. That's so cool. I tend to forget that you were a middle school English teacher because you were already in your coaching role, I think, when I started following you. So I will need to come back to you as a resource for sure in my journey as a middle school teacher. You kind of already talked about the grading reform. So let's start there. Let's just dig in a little deeper. Why did you decide that you even needed grading reform? And Was it hard to do in your classroom?
Well, I will be honest. I always think you have to be completely honest with your journey, right? And we always talk about failure and failing forward, but then we don't like to be vulnerable about where we came from. And I think acknowledging that is part of how we get growth.
For
So
sure.
I was the teacher who I was working at a school that was very grade obsessed.
Mm,
Wanted the grades, even for parents, right? Grades can be a social
for
standard.
sure.
It's something that we use as a status symbol. And I loved my content, obviously, because I had an English degree. So I really was tied to my content, and I was tied to the success of my students, but I hadn't quite made that connection yet, that one didn't necessarily relate to the other. And so I spent a lot of time giving excessive homework, now giving lots of chances to still redo in my class, but that was against what the rest of my team was doing. So I almost had to keep that secret. It was like you can't admit that I'm allowing someone to redo an assessment for points, for
Wow.
a C. So I was doing some of those things, but also still sticking very strongly with, we have to have homework. Grades are very important. The tests that I gave, I really, looking back, I'm embarrassed because I really equated the length of the test to the rigor, right? Now, there were things that I absolutely could have cut, could have changed, could have made more applicable to their lives. And I'll say that I still have students who say, I was really prepared for high school English. Thank you. And that's great, but that's not what I wanted them to be prepared for. I wanted them to be independent thinkers and
Mm,
know how to problem solve. And I found that they weren't able to do that in a really meaningful way. And that's where that grade reform started for me. So I really started reading Rick Warmley. He was my first introduction into it. And I'm just going to tell you, I devoured everything I could find. My school district at the time, the school district I was in, we have two middle schools. The other middle school is very different from the one I was in. They weren't looking at changing from a traditional grading model at all. I absolutely was all on board, and my principal was all on board. And so he sent me to a Rick Warmley, little conference. I got to meet him and hear from him and talk from him. And from then on, it was just, I was looking at all kinds of people doing work in that space. I piloted it in my school. And I also asked for student reflection, anonymous.
mm,
What I found was that students were overwhelmingly happy with it. And some of the
mm.
comments would be, I don't cheat in the morning in the bleachers any longer, or my parents don't redo my work at night, or I don't have to call up a friend and ask for the answer because I'm afraid I'm going to fail. And that may seem like I'm making those statements up because, right, like that's what we
Mm-mm.
want people to say, but that is what my students were
Right.
saying. And the struggle was mostly with parents wondering, well, why don't they have to memorize
Right.
things for a test? And how can I know that they're doing well if they don't have to memorize a page worth of facts? Or if I'm not getting homework every night that they're doing? It was really a parent communication piece that was probably the
Mm.
biggest.
Okay, so kudos to your principal who sent you and invested in you to you know help you along this path. Okay, because I'm sure even at that time it was probably a little bit lonely, and just, yeah, discovering all of that. And also going to like standards based grading for me has also been like a transition of thinking, because it goes from this got you mindset to I want you to succeed. And if you have to do this 3, 5 times, I want you to succeed. It really is a transformational way of thinking, even as a teacher for me. And I'm not great obsessive with my own children. I just haven't reached that time in my life where I'm just obsessed with their grades. I really want them to develop themselves as good people first. And I feel like their intelligence is there. So, but I will say that knowing that they go to a school where they're going to be supported if they do fail and they can try again, I actually feel like that supports their character as well. So when you talk about your students' reflection, that's beautiful. That should be how it is, but we're still in a system that's more of a got you. And it's even with my students, they're just like, wait a minute, you're giving me, we can correct this. You're going to give me a 5 on this. Yeah, yeah. And even going to a grading scale where it's not mostly about failure, but it's mostly about success. I mean, it really is a shift. How did you win your parents over?
Well, I will tell you that there were a few that I never did win over. And so I will be very honest. When we were doing this, because the other middle school was not on board. Now we never changed to a standards-based report card because we understood that was not a district. Now, interestingly, the elementary grades, the lower grades were already standards-based and had been for years. But the idea of the middle school switching was threatening for some reason. So it was, we were in different spaces, right? And different leaders, I mean, they have different ideas also. So like you said, I really was in the right space to be supported by an administrator who saw that the traditional model, he saw what I saw, that we were failing kids in different ways because of that. So I actually put myself in front of the school board when we had to do, like, here's why we're doing this. Here's our data to show. We were able to pull information to show how Illinois public colleges, universities were actually for grades, standards-based grading, and that most of Illinois' private universities also were for standards-based grading because it would help with their admissions process so much. And so I really just I didn't ever win over 100% of teachers. And I'm sure that I never won over 100% of kids either, because at that point in 8th grade, if their parents aren't won over, they might never be won over also because they're hearing that. Or sometimes by 8th grade, we've been playing the game of school so long that that's what we want. We know how to get that A. So I've done that. I've done those steps to get there. So I want the A. But what I had to do was I believed in it so much that I was able to always speak to their concerns and confidently tell them, like, I understand, I do hear you. I understand what you're saying, but this is where we're doing better. This is where we're changing it and we're going to get a better outcome. And so I guess, again, it's not that I got everyone won over, but that people really saw that this is where what we were doing. I was passionate about it. I wasn't going to change my mind about it, and that this is what we were doing. So, but I will say, I had most parents and most students who were on board.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you. And, 2 things stand out when you said they're so used to playing the game of school. And that right there, standards-based grading, I feel anyway, kind of gets you more to the heart of why you're learning. So, that, I think you described it really well. And also, making change, again, is so hard, and you still did it, knowing that, you didn't have everybody cheering you on, but you knew it was best for kids, and you went ahead and you kept doing what you knew was right for them. And did your peers eventually kind of start with you as well? Did they join you in that journey?
So I actually kind of piloted on my own for, I think it was a semester. And then I had a couple colleagues who said, you know what? I kind of like that. I'm intrigued. I'll do that too. And our principal was very supportive. And then over that summer, then we had more like staff-wide work on it. And the principal really said, like, this is the change we're going to go to. Like, let's do this. Now, I do think we learned a lot of lessons. And when I talk to people about this, I think our principal could have included the staff more in those discussions. I think he tried, you know what I mean? I think he tried, but we didn't know. We'd never been here before. And so for some people, they needed a little more of that time to reach that buy-in. However, I will say I've seen a lot of situations when it comes to standards-based grades that there is a time where you just have to say, this is what we're doing.
Right.
And then you have to have the support to follow that up. That's the essential thing, the support, so that people understand always why you're doing it. As new teachers come in, why are we doing this? A review of our best practices, the parent component. There's a lot that goes into it.
For sure. And I hope that somebody who's listening and who may be on this journey, the beginning of it, whether it's a teacher or a school leader, I hope that they're being encouraged right now by listening to this, because I know that I am. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. You go into schools a lot. Like when I look at your social media, you're traveling. Like you don't just stay in one place. You're going to different conferences, you're going to different trainings. And I think you even put together trainings. So I wanted to ask you and pick your brain. What are the most important needs that you're seeing in schools regarding ed tech?
So I think that's a really interesting question because we have a lot of ed tech, right? And
Mm-hmm.
um, every school obviously has, and even every teacher within that school has different needs. But I would say that one of the things that I think could be most helpful, and I do see some interesting programs being developed and even changing, improving, are platforms that help us reflect. So platforms that either as educational coaches can use with for themselves to see how they do when they go in and help an educator, but also that they can use with an educator who is looking to grow in their practice. And the thing is, none of us want to be recorded, right? We
Right.
always hate it because whether we're a fantastic teacher, none of us are perfect. There's always going to be a mistake that we make. We're hard on ourselves. But
Mm-hmm.
even the person that is most confident in their skill will probably hesitate a bit at being recorded because once it's there, we're afraid of what we'll see and what that means that we have to do. But I think as I talk to teachers, as I talk to administrators and educational coaches, the idea of reflection, always comes up. But how do you do that meaningfully? If you aren't willing to watch yourself, then you really aren't going to grow. You have to be able to watch it and then come to terms with whatever it is and then be able to grow from there. Or realize you were doing something way better than you even realized now that you've seen it. So I think there's a need for that. And there are things, there's a platform called Mosaic that I know is doing that. And it's like tying it even allows you to tie those observations that you make of yourself in your classroom to different like standards you might be looking for. Like if you want to get better at X, Y, or Z, you can target it so that you're looking for X, Y, and Z. So there are platforms. It's not the only one out there that you can do that. And then also the idea of slowing down and focusing. I love Engageable, which used to be Focusable. I
Mm-hmm.
love that tool. And I think that one's actually pretty unique. There's not really anything else like it, but our own brains and our students, we do need to find time to stop, refocus. We're drawn in so many different directions. Sorry, Melly, I keep getting distracted. I'm such a hand talker. I have my hands like going wild. I'm so sorry. I get really
It's okay.
into it.
I love it. I love it. It's not distracting me at all.
So I just think that tools, what I see from students or from educators is the need for those reflection tools. And that's what, even the ability to focus is a reflection time. What do I need to actually be working on? What can I let go of for now? How do I need to bring myself back? And that all really goes around our own SEL needs, right? Like
Yes.
self-care. That's our big thing. Self-care was like the funny, we could memeable word, right? You need to concentrate on self-care. Now come to this half day meeting, like those
Right.
things. But in the real sense, we do need that. And we need ed tech focused around how to make meaningful time for ourselves and for that reflection and that growth without it feeling like it's one more tool to learn how to use.
For sure. The power of reflection is truly so great. I'm glad that you talked about it. And I just want to, give a shout out to Spaces EDU because I used it with my own girls and I was really concerned about my youngest reading. And once she started recording herself in the Spaces EDU platform, that's when it completely turned around for her. And it was watching herself and giving her purpose. And I know that a lot of us believe in reflection, but I still don't see it as much as we should. And another thing that I can't believe you didn't say, I thought you were going to say all about AI. What? Because everywhere we look on social media, it's all about AI. Are you kidding me? So you're saying that that's not what you think is the biggest need right now?
So I think AI absolutely is important for us to talk about and for us to teach about. It's not going anywhere. It's been around for a long time. It's just making its splash, right? Um, but I think that if you polled teachers, and I've done this on a smaller scale, if you
Mhm.
polled teachers and even admin and educational coaches and curriculum directors, most likely you are not going to find that AI is their biggest concern, because it's the behaviors that are, why aren't they coming to school? Why aren't they able to focus? Why aren't they doing the work? And that there's all of these other things. And it could be with the traditional grading system. It could be, that fact that they don't have support at home. It could be that they've spent 8 hours at school, 7 hours at school, whatever it is. And now they have to go home and do hours of homework, and they don't want to do that. We don't want to do that.
Right. It's true.
So, there's so many other things that we have to focus on too. And so I think that the tools for reflection help address those problems that then make using AI easier to do. And honestly, when we talk about AI, I think it's essential that we are talking about the ethics behind AI also. And so it's really interesting. So now I got my hands going again, Melody, because I actually just have been talking to a school. I'm going to go in and do some work for them around AI. And when I was asking, what do you want? What is your outcome for this? What do you hope teachers walk away with? I kind of gave, do you want to talk about X, Y, Z? And the response was really, I want you to talk about kind of all of it, because I know I'm going to have some people who don't know anything about it, some people who are excited to jump in, and some people who have said absolutely not to it. But that overall, I need our community to come together and understand that it's not about kids are going to cheat. It's about learning how to use the tools that we have. And again, kids are going to cheat. Why are they going to cheat? What's the underlying issue? So it's not about AI. Once again, it's about the underlying issue. And then once we know that, we can better figure out how to use those tools. We also say a lot about we're helping the kids learn real world things. But in the real world, they're using AI all the time. I mean, ChatGPT is a go-to, or whatever other AI assistant that you want to use. That's happening in the real world. So it's learning, how would I actually responsibly and ethically use this to still have my own work, or to show when I've used an assistant, not I don't get to use this at all.
Right. I love that you said that, because that's what I say to my students all the time. Like, you're in the real world. And, I still give spelling tests out, and I'm teaching 7th grade ELA. But my spelling tests look really different. They're not the traditional ones. I just give them some activity where they have to practice spelling, and I call it a spelling mastery or whatever. And I'm like, and if you want to check your word, you can Google it. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, because I write, and when I don't know how to spell a word, I'm Googling it, or I'm asking somebody else. And because spelling, like, I don't want to penalize somebody that is a terrible speller, and probably always will be, right? Because the people that can't spell by the time that they're in 7th grade are usually the people that grow up to be not great spellers. And that's not the worst thing to be in the world, honestly. So I love that you said that, because we should be practicing real world stuff in our classroom. It's the best thing. Helping them navigate AI should be what we're doing, instead of just slamming the door and saying it's not here, because it's here. Everything is here. I think reform is here. It's like, what are we doing about it? We talked about it with grades. You could talk about it with EdTech. I think they're looking at us. Our students are looking at us. How are we modeling that to them? And then you talked about the underlying issues: absenteeism, learning social emotional skills. Like, this is really, and as a former middle school teacher, I hope that you'll agree that I feel like those are the most important reasons that they should be in our classroom. I mean, it's not like they're trying to get scholarships for college yet when they're in our middle school classrooms. Like, this is the foundation that we are helping. And then when they go to high school and they're using AI to help them write those papers, they'll have some sort of ethics behind it, because that's the foundation that we've given them. Does that make any sense? I don't know.
No, it absolutely does. But I also think you hit on an interesting point there too. Having a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old. My 18-year-old is in his senior year. He just turned 18. He is in AP classes. He has always, my younger one actually as well. They've been, quote unquote, good students academically, but interestingly, I think because they saw me and my change, my reform in my classroom, they were old enough to know how my attitude changed. They were able to, even to hear my conversations with my husband about the things that I was loving seeing, or the things that frustrated me, maybe that I saw happening in other spaces. And they actually are frustrated that their own school doesn't replicate the idea that learning is to prepare you for that critical thinking on your own, to make you successful, because you can go and tell whether something is fake or real when it's a media story that is blasting you all the time. And that's something that adults struggle with. So the fact that we haven't shifted our own kind of ideas about what is most important about school is frustrating to me, because I think of, the idea of grade reform from a traditional grading system to standards-based is not new. I mean, it's multi-decades old. I feel like it was talked about before this, but in the 80s, even it was big in the 80s talking about reform. And we're still 40 years later trying to say why it's important to reform traditional grading. And our students see that, so I think kind of all of that goes into play. And honestly, my older son, he doesn't want to go to college, despite the fact that he has those AP courses, that he's got the academic success. He wants to go into a trade. He is absolutely dedicated to being a plumber. And that's also a shift we need to make. We need to realize that success doesn't mean college, and that for a variety of reasons, it doesn't mean college. And that when we spend time preparing students for the real world, that doesn't just mean going off to college and how to survive with their college professors. That truly does mean, what critical thinking skills do you need? What historical context do you need in order to be successful? What writing skills do you need to be successful? And it may not be that we need to be writing, a 10-page research paper, because our tools have changed. We don't have to go to the library to borrow the encyclopedia anymore. We've got all of this at our hands. So we need to update some of those ideas.
Speaking of ideas, we're going to talk about the big IDEAcon in just a second, but you and we were teaching at the transition of all of this from technology, like when we actually used encyclopedias to Google. Yeah. So yes, I just think that's crazy. All right, we're getting closer to the end. I could talk to you forever, and I want to. Even when this is gone, I'm going to talk your head off. No. Before we go, I want you to tell us what IDEAcon. I loved it. I got to be there and represent Spaces EDU this past year, and I loved it. It was so. It's an ISTE affiliate, so you're getting all the EdTech, but because it's not the big ISTE, you get those relationships in it. I saw so many amazing educators that I had followed online for years. So tell us a little bit about what excites you about IDEAcon, and why should someone even consider going?
Okay, well, I could talk about IDEAcon and IDEA all day, so I'm going to make this succinct. I'm going to try, get my hands going. So really, I can't talk about IDEAcon without first acknowledging that IDEA, the organization behind it, came first. So IDEA actually started in 1985 as a way to get computers in every teacher's classroom. We have changed a lot. So really right now, yes, we talk about EdTech and best practices with EdTech and support educators in all roles for that. But we also talk about best practices in general. So we're talking across the board, and that's with DEI and accessibility, and not just in the way that it makes a good hashtag, but we're dedicated to really bringing educators in those roles the resources, the quality learning, so that they can grow. And we're dedicated to doing it in an affordable way. So free, or as affordable as we can make it. I mean, our conference is 3 days in a row. And it's early bird pricing. You get access to those 3 days and over 40 hours of on-demand content for the early bird price. I think it's like $3.99 for all of that. It's incredible, the value that we're able to give. And the conference is an experience. We are excited that that's not just what we say. we continually have the feedback that people love coming because they feel like they are really connected. They're part of something bigger. They go to sessions, yes, but the exhibit hall has multiple hands-on areas. There's always some way to be involved in making, creating, even with the exhibitors. It is truly an immersive experience. We have thought leaders that we bring in, and these thought leaders, again, not just from EdTech, but they're different people that are doing work all across the country. We bring them in and have them share. And then the same thing, we have our keynotes, but we try to go for that experiential piece, also different. We're not bringing in, we try very hard to not bring in the same people that you will see at a lot of different conferences. We work very hard to bring in different voices, maybe voices that have been around for a while, but you might not have necessarily heard. So I take a lot of pride in that and the experience that we create. It's really for everyone from classroom teachers to administrators to even CTOs. We do have something for everyone.
Yeah. And it's not just the conference. You have trainings and classes like all year long. Am I right about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have Wednesday webinars. We have some incredible partners, and they put on Wednesday webinars that are absolutely free to anyone who wants to take part in them. And again, we believe in trying to make things as equitable as possible. So they're virtual, 3:30 to 4:30 Central Time, so that it's at the end of the day, at least here. We know sometimes that can be harder, but we also
people in Alaska.
But we also record those. So if you register for it, you get sent the recording when it's done so that you have access to it. And I will say, even though we have Illinois in our name, our organization, we have members in 21 countries all across the US. And that's IDEAcon is not just, Illinois educators who come either. We do have, Melody, you were there last year. I'm hoping I'm going to see you this year. So
you are.
We have a lot of, it's a great place to meet people with new perspectives, to meet people to connect with who actually may have similar interests, but you would never get to, meet them in this way and interact with them. So it truly is one of those, I look forward to it every year. And then getting to continue the work throughout the year with different workshops and trainings and just the connections again, even through something like we have chapter events, and we're looking at starting an out-of-state chapter, so it's like you can still stay connected to those people. Sorry, Melody, I'm getting going. I know I'm talking too much.
No,
here.
I love it. You're not talking too much. There's something about the Midwest spirit. Like, it's just so welcoming. I am from the Midwest, so I can say this, and I do feel at home, and it was an amazing experience. Do you have IDEAcon in the same hotel every year?
Yes. So we actually have it at the Renaissance in Schaumburg, Illinois. And the reason why it's such a great venue, we think, is because it has the entire convention center there. And then, yes, if you stay in that hotel right there, you don't have to walk outside in February in Illinois. You don't have to worry about whether there's snow. You're just right there with everything. And we have a lot of night events as well. And again, our exhibitors are so fun. And we have Google and Apple playgrounds. So, there's just something for everyone.
I love it. I'm going to be there this year, y'all. So again, this will be my second year and I cannot wait. Anything else you want to add about IDEAcon before I ask you our last question?
I do want to say we are a completely nonprofit. So that is something that that's not going to change. And our mission always stays the same. So if you want to become a member, you're not an IDEA member yet, it is open to everyone and it's free. And that's actually in our bylaws. So it will not be changing. Our membership would have to vote on that. And I think we know that that's not going to happen. So it really is. It's a free professional learning organization for you to belong to.
Gosh, that's incredible. And that's how you know that you're really for educators. So applauding to your idea. Yes, that's such a great idea.
Thanks.
Yeah. So we are at the last question of the podcast, and I always like to ask my guests this question because we are whole people, and that's actually what I'm going to be talking about at IDEAcon. And there's so much going on in our world that we all have something that's just in our brain. And when you have the platform, when people are listening to you, what is it that you want them to be aware of and share? And when I ask like for this wisdom, it can be about education, or it can just be about life as you are a whole person. So that's what I want to end the show on, is what is some wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
This is a tough one, Melody. I think when I consider wisdom that I might like to share, it really comes from the place where I'm at now and growing, and that it is okay to speak up. It is okay to have different ideas. And but on top of that, you have to be willing to listen to the other people. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with them, but how can you have a good support to how you feel if you aren't aware of how the other person feels?
Right.
So, I just think in so many situations, if we would stop and at least listen, truly listen, not just planning our response, and then respond not out of an emotional place, but out of here's how I really feel. This is my truth.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can speak to that, I think that is how you get to be, I don't know, more at peace with some things. It doesn't mean you'll like every decision. It doesn't mean that you won't get frustrated that you can't impact change the way you want to, but you will know that you're always putting yourself out there and that you're always being true to what you believe.
Gosh, I love that so much. That's actually something that I am working with my seventh graders right now when we talk about like debate and putting ideas on the table and arguing, even, or like being argumentative, not in a fighting way, but just like trying to show evidence and debate your idea. So I think that's wonderful, because I want to see, and I know you want to see, grown people who can talk through logically about ideas. And like you just said, we don't always share the same idea. And we keep coming back to idea. I don't mean this as a big pun, but
Melody, I do want to make sure that I say also, I know that I've talked a lot about things that I feel like we could do to change and grow, but I also acknowledge that educators are doing very hard work.
yes,
And it doesn't mean, just because I recognize that there are things that I believe could be changed for the better of students, does not mean I think that educators are doing a poor job. It's just that I'm recognizing where we have some areas to grow to help everyone. So I just want to make sure I thank everyone for doing those jobs in education. It is difficult. I acknowledge all the time, the energy that it takes, and I can still do that and acknowledge that we have room to grow.
And that is what makes you an amazing leader, Stefanie. So yeah.
Thanks, Melody.
Thank you. And y'all, join our Spaces EDU community. Let's not let the conversation end here. Share what's going on in your world and what's impacting your world. And, like we said earlier, it's not just about all AI. We're still trying to form those relationships. We're still trying to teach SEL to our students. We're still trying to just do everything we can to support our students. And just like Stefanie said, thank you to everybody who is doing the good work. We appreciate you so much. And Stefanie, thank you for being on this episode today. It's meaningful, and I know how sincere you are. I know that you are you what is it? You walk the talk. And did I say it backwards? I don't know, because I'm
No,
a little
you're
teacher
good.
tired.
You're good.
But you really do, and that's why I think you're such an amazing leader, because it comes from such a genuine place. And when we're modeling, I think that's the best way to teach anything and to show that it's sincere, is by modeling all of these. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, everybody. So we'll see you again next time. Bye.